Picture this nightmare. You're 24 years old, suspended 40 feet above hell itself. Your parachute silk wrapped around the stone spire of a medieval church like a death shroud. Below you, an entire French town burns in the darkness. German machine guns chatter their deadly rhythm, cutting down your friends in streets that run red with American blood. Bodies hang from tree branches like grotesque Christmas ornaments, and you're pretending to be dead, while the most brutal urban warfare unfolds beneath your dangling boots. But here's what will freeze your soul. You can hear them screaming. Not just voices. You can distinguish individual men. Thompson from Chicago, begging for his mother. Martinez from Texas, calling for a medic who will never come. Williams from Georgia, crying out coordinates for artillery that doesn't exist. These aren't statistics. These are men you shared cigarettes with, men whose girlfriends' photos you've seen, men who sang drunk songs with you in English pubs just hours ago. This is Private John Steele's 2-hour death watch above Sainte-Mère-Église. And he's got the best seat for the most desperate gamble in military history. Right now, in the pre-dawn darkness of June the 6th, 1944, 18,000 men are falling from the sky into Nazi-occupied Europe like angels of death. Most have no idea where they are. Their equipment is scattered across 300 square miles of enemy territory. 90% will miss their targets by miles. Hundreds are already drowning in Norman marshes, weighed down by 80 pounds of gear, clawing at muddy water that's about to become their grave. Yet from this cosmic disaster, this spectacular failure of military planning, the Allies are about to achieve one of the most stunning victories in warfare. How? Because sometimes the best laid plans fail so spectacularly that they accidentally create something better than anyone dared imagine. This is the story of how 18,000 men jumped into hell and came out holding the keys to Hitler's fortress Europe. This is the story of the most chaotic, desperate, and ultimately triumphant night in military history. And it begins with men who volunteered to jump first into absolute darkness. Before 18,000 paratroopers could jump, somebody had to go first. Into total darkness, into complete unknown, into the most dangerous job in the world. They called them pathfinders. And if you think jumping out of a plane behind enemy lines sounds terrifying, imagine doing it an hour before anyone else, knowing that if your radio fails, tens of thousands of men will drop into the wrong death traps. It's 12:01 a.m., Tuesday, June the 6th, 1944. A single US Air Force C-47 Skytrain knifes through fog so thick the pilots can barely see their own engines. Inside, 18 men sit in near total darkness, each one carrying the fate of the free world in electronic equipment that has to work perfectly, or thousands will die. Captain Frank Lillyman of the 101st Airborne Division grips his Eureka beacon, a marvel of 1944 technology that weighs 35 pounds and contains enough vacuum tubes and copper wiring to build a small radio station. This device will transmit a signal on a frequency only Allied aircraft can detect, creating an invisible lighthouse in the Norman darkness. But Lillyman knows something that gnaws at his confidence. Only half of these beacons have worked correctly in training. The other half? Complete failures. Dead weight carried by men who might die for nothing. If this thing doesn't work, he mutters to Sergeant Bill Olson beside him, 18,000 guys are going to land in German laps. Olson checks his equipment for the 100th time. Alongside the Eureka beacon, he carries backup batteries that weigh another 15 pounds, emergency flares that might save lives or reveal positions to enemy snipers, and a radio set that connects him to aircraft flying at 150 miles per hour through anti-aircraft fire. The mathematics are brutal. 128 Pathfinder teams scattered across 50 miles of enemy territory. If 70% of their beacons function correctly, the main assault might succeed. If fewer work, the invasion could collapse before it begins. The green light flashes. Lillyman jumps first, not just into the night air, but into history itself. Behind him, 17 men follow, their parachutes blooming in the darkness like deadly flowers carrying the seeds of liberation. At 12:15 a.m., Captain Lilliman becomes the first American soldier to touch French soil on D-Day. His landing is perfect, a textbook touchdown, in a field exactly where intelligence predicted. But as he struggles out of his parachute harness, his worst fears materialize. His Eureka beacon is dead. The landing impact has shattered vacuum tubes worth more than a soldier's monthly pay. Copper wiring has snapped. The device that should guide thousands to safety has become 35 pounds of useless metal and glass. Lilliman has 15 minutes to establish backup communications before the main assault begins. 15 minutes to save an invasion with broken equipment and emergency procedures that exist only in theory. Meanwhile, 12 miles away, another Pathfinder team faces different technological nightmares. Staff Sergeant Robert Murphy lands in a flooded field where his radio immediately shorts out in 3 feet of water. His backup equipment sinks into Norman mud that swallows gear like quicksand. Murphy and his men spend precious minutes diving underwater, feeling blindly for equipment they can't see, knowing that every second of delay means more aircraft flying toward the wrong targets. 23 miles to the east, Pathfinder Team 7 achieves what everyone hoped for: a perfect landing with functioning equipment. Sergeant Michael O'Brien assembles his Eureka beacon in 4 minutes flat, following procedures drilled into muscle memory through endless repetition. The beacon comes alive with electronic humming that sounds like salvation itself. O'Brien transmits the coded signal, "Rebecca, Rebecca, Rebecca," the call sign that will guide Allied aircraft to safety. But success creates new terrors. The moment his beacon activates, O'Brien becomes a target. German direction-finding equipment can locate radio transmissions, and enemy patrols hunt electronic signals with dogs and direction finders. O'Brien must choose: maintain the signal that guides Allied aircraft to safety, or shut down and hide when German search teams approach, keep broadcasting and die, or go silent and let thousands drop into killing grounds. He chooses to keep broadcasting. By 12:45 a.m., scattered across Normandy, 43 Pathfinder beacons are operational. 31 have failed completely. 54 teams are missing, dead, or unable to establish communications. The mathematical reality is stark. Less than half the planned guidance systems are working. The most technologically dependent military operation in history is succeeding on courage and improvisation rather than electronic precision. But those 43 working beacons create an invisible network of salvation. Each transmits coordinates accurate to within 50 yards, guiding aircraft through fog, anti-aircraft fire, and the chaos of the largest airborne assault in history. Or Captain Lilliman, working with backup equipment salvaged from his dead beacon, manages to establish communications at 12:52 a.m. His voice crackles across the airwaves. Drop zone, Alpha, drop zone, Alpha. Clear and ready for delivery. 13 minutes later, 432 aircraft, carrying 6,600 paratroopers, follow Lilliman's signal to successful drops. His broken beacon couldn't guide them, but his courage and backup procedures save thousands of lives. The Pathfinders succeed, not because their technology works perfectly, but because they refuse to let technological failure destroy human determination. When their machines break, they become the machines. When their radios fail, they become the signals. 43 electronic beacons scattered across enemy territory, some working perfectly, others jury-rigged from broken parts, all operated by men who know they're probably going to die. This is the invisible infrastructure of invasion, built from vacuum tubes and courage. While American Pathfinders establish their deadly constellation of radio beacons across western Normandy, 55 miles down the coast, the British are preparing to attempt something that defies physics, common sense, and every rational principle of aviation. They're going to land 180 elite soldiers in engineless aircraft made of plywood and canvas in total darkness, in occupied territory, within yards of heavily defended bridges, without making a sound. The Airspeed Horsa glider represents the ultimate marriage of desperation and engineering genius. Picture a wooden coffin with wings, because that's essentially what it is. Constructed from birch plywood, spruce spars, and fabric covering, it weighs 8,370 pounds empty and carries 30 fully equipped soldiers plus their gear. But here's what makes piloting a glider an act of controlled suicide. You have exactly one chance to get it right. No engines means no second approach. No powered flight means no abort option. No radio communication means no guidance from the ground. You're flying a 40-foot projectile filled with 30 men toward a target you've only seen in photographs, guided by memory and prayer. Staff Sergeant Jim Woolwork has memorized the approach to Pegasus Bridge with obsessive precision. Every tree, every hedgerow, every shadow that might indicate a landing zone has been burned into his memory through months of studying aerial photographs and scale models. But photographs can't capture the bone-rattling violence of glider flight. The aircraft bucks and shudders with every gust of wind. Wooden joints creak under stress that pushes them to structural limits. The men crammed into the cargo compartment feel every vibration, every wind gust, every moment when the glider seems ready to tear itself apart. Major John Howard, squeezed into the glider's cramped interior with 29 other soldiers, understands the physics of their situation with crystal clarity. They're approaching the ground at 90 miles per hour in an aircraft designed to crash. The nose will crumple on impact. The fuselage will buckle. If they're lucky, the aircraft will bounce and skid to a stop. If they're unlucky, it will cartwheel and disintegrate. At 12:07 a.m., the Halifax tow plane releases Woolwork's glider over the French coast. Suddenly, the world goes silent, except for the whisper of wind over fabric wings. Woolwork deploys his spoilers, metal plates that rise from the wings to increase drag and steepen his descent. The glider drops like a controlled avalanche, trading altitude for accuracy in calculations that exist only in his head. Through the darkness, he can see nothing but shadows and fog. No landmarks, no familiar terrain, no visual confirmation that he's approaching the correct target. He's flying entirely by dead reckoning, trusting months of preparation and 24 years of accumulated flying instinct. 500 feet, 300 feet, 200 feet. The ground rushes up invisibly, inevitable as death itself. Impact. The nose hits first, crumpling like paper. The glider bounces 15 feet into the air in a grotesque ballet of wood and steel and human bodies. It crashes down again, harder this time, shedding pieces of itself with every yard. The landing gear collapses, wings snap, the tail section tears away completely. Men are thrown against each other, against the aircraft's frame, against the unforgiving reality of physics. Finally, mercifully, silence. Major Howard shakes his head, trying to clear the fog of impact. Around him, 30 men slowly discover they're alive. Someone is unconscious, someone else is vomiting, but they're breathing, they're moving, they're ready to fight. Howard stumbles out of the wreckage and looks around. In the dim starlight, he can see the outline of a bridge. Not just any bridge, their bridge. Pegasus Bridge. Woolwork has achieved something supernatural. Flying an engineless aircraft in total darkness through fog, he has landed within 50 yards of their target. 50 yards, in a field he'd never seen, guided by nothing but memory and skill, and the kind of precision that makes strong men weep. But Woolwork's miracle is just the beginning. 2 more gliders land with equal precision. 3 wooden aircraft, 3 controlled crashes, 3 small miracles of navigation and desperate courage. The first German sentry to investigate the crashes never makes it back to his post. Lieutenant Den Brotheridge leads the charge across Pegasus Bridge, 30 men following in a stream of controlled violence. Brotheridge is 28 years old, married, with a baby due in 3 months. His wife Maggie is 8 months pregnant back home in the West Midlands. In a few hours, she'll become a widow without knowing it. A German bullet finds Brotheridge as he leads his men across the bridge. He falls to ancient stones that have witnessed 800 years of history, becoming the first Allied soldier killed in action on D-Day. His last words are lost in gunfire, but his sacrifice echoes in the boots of men who follow him across the bridge toward liberation. The battle for Pegasus Bridge lasts exactly 15 minutes. When it's over, the British flag flies where the swastika had hung moments before. Howard grabs his radio and transmits the pre-arranged code. Ham and jam. Mission accomplished. The bridge is theirs. 3 wooden aircraft and 30 men have captured the key to the entire eastern flank of the invasion. No engines, no second chances, no margin for error, just skill, courage, and the kind of impossible precision that changes the course of history. But holding the bridge will be another matter entirely. While the British achieve pinpoint precision at Pegasus Bridge, the American airborne assault 60 miles to the west is turning into the most spectacular navigational disaster in military history. It's 1:30 a.m., and 13,000 American paratroopers are dropping from 850 C-47 transport aircraft into what should be carefully mapped drop zones behind Utah and Omaha beaches. Instead, they're scattering across 300 square miles of Norman countryside like seeds in a hurricane. The statistics are staggering. 90% of American paratroopers land outside their designated drop zones, not by a few hundred yards by miles, some by as much as 20 miles from where they're supposed to be. But here's what military planners didn't anticipate. This disaster is about to become the invasion's greatest strategic advantage. Staff Sergeant William Tucker of the 82nd Airborne approaches his jump door at 1:45 a.m., unaware that his aircraft is 12 miles off course, flying at twice the correct altitude, approaching a German stronghold instead of an Allied drop zone. Tucker is 22 years old, from a farm in Oklahoma, where the biggest excitement is Saturday night dances and Sunday church service. He's never been more than 50 miles from home until the army shipped him to England. Now he's about to jump into Nazi-occupied France with 80 pounds of equipment that includes everything he might need to survive behind enemy lines for a week. His gear tells the story of American industrial might applied to individual soldiers. M1, Garand rifle with 200 rounds of ammunition. K rations that taste like cardboard but contain enough calories to sustain life. Medical kit with morphine syrettes and sulfur powder for wounds. Demolition charges to destroy bridges or bunkers. Emergency radio for calling artillery support. Maps printed on silk to prevent rustling. Escape kit with gold coins and foreign currency. Tucker is a walking, breathing arsenal designed to function independently in enemy territory. But independence only works if you know where you are. The red light comes on. 4 minutes to target. Tucker's aircraft takes anti-aircraft fire that blows basketball-sized holes in the fuselage. Shrapnel rattles through the cargo compartment like deadly hail. The pilot takes evasive action, throwing the aircraft into a diving turn that sends paratroopers tumbling into each other. 3 minutes. Through small windows, Tucker can see muzzle flashes lighting up the night. German ground forces are shooting at everything that moves, trying to bring down aircraft before paratroopers can jump. Every tracer round represents 5 regular bullets, and there are a lot of tracers. 2 minutes. The aircraft shudders as another burst of flak explodes nearby. Something hot and sharp tears through Tucker's equipment pack, destroying his emergency rations and damaging his radio. He's already lost critical gear, and he hasn't even jumped yet. 1 minute. The green light flashes. Tucker jumps into darkness that offers no promises, no guarantees, no second chances. His parachute deploys with bone-jarring violence, torn silk billowing above him in the Norman sky. He hits the ground in a cow pasture 12 miles from his intended drop zone. His radio is dead. His maps are soaked with water from a stream he landed in. Half his ammunition is scattered across a field he can't see in the darkness. But Tucker is alive, armed, and ready to fight, and he's not alone. This scene repeats itself across hundreds of aircraft and thousands of paratroopers. Pilots flying blind through flak and fog, desperately trying to find drop zones that exist only as coordinates on maps they can't read in the darkness. Paratroopers jumping from damaged aircraft into landscapes they don't recognize, carrying equipment they hope will keep them alive until dawn. The dispersion is so wide that some paratroopers land in towns already occupied by other Allied units. Others drop directly into German headquarters, finding themselves surrounded by enemy soldiers before their feet touch the ground. A few land so far off course that they spend the entire day walking just to reach the battle area. In the aircraft behind Tucker's, Private First Class Robert Cole experiences a different nightmare. His plane takes a direct hit from German anti-aircraft fire just as the men prepare to jump. The starboard engine explodes in a ball of flame, sending the aircraft into a death spiral. The pilot, Lieutenant James Morrison, fights to maintain control long enough for his passengers to escape. "Jump! Jump now!" he screams over the roar of wind and flame. Cole doesn't hesitate. He follows his fellow paratroopers out the door, one after another, jumping from a burning aircraft into a night that promises nothing but chaos and violence. Morrison stays with his aircraft to the end, fighting the controls until the C-47 augers into a Normandy field in a fireball visible for miles. All 16 paratroopers escape safely. Morrison dies at age 24, his sacrifice allowing others to complete their mission. His heroism exemplifies what's happening across the entire airborne assault. Individual acts of courage transforming tactical disaster into strategic opportunity. Because here's what German commanders can't understand. They're not facing a concentrated enemy force that can be identified, located, and countered with conventional tactics. They're confronting what appears to be attacks everywhere at once. German radio intercepts reveal their confusion. American paratroopers attacking crossroads near Carentan. British forces have captured bridges over Caen Canal. Enemy soldiers spotted near Sainte-Mère-Église. Unidentified aircraft landing in fields southeast of Cherbourg. Each report demands response. Each threat requires troops to investigate. But German commanders can't tell which threats are real and which are diversions. They can't distinguish between major offensives and minor raids. This forces German forces to disperse their response, exactly the opposite of what sound military doctrine demands. Instead of concentrating reserves against the main Allied effort, they're compelled to scatter troops across the entire region. The scattered airborne assault disrupts German communications and command networks at the most critical moment. Telephone lines are cut, radio stations are attacked, officers are killed in random encounters with small groups of paratroopers. By dawn, the German defensive network in Normandy has been effectively paralyzed, not through any single decisive action, but through hundreds of small unit encounters that collectively destroy their ability to respond coherently to the invasion. The airborne assault succeeds, not because it goes according to plan, but because it creates strategic effects that transcend any tactical plan. 18,000 men jumping into darkness and uncertainty fundamentally alter the battlefield in ways no conventional military operation could achieve. Field Marshal Erwin Rommel's most diabolical innovation isn't a gun emplacement or tank trap, it's water. Rommel has systematically flooded 15,000 acres of low-lying farmland behind the invasion beaches, creating vast killing grounds where paratroopers carrying 80 pounds of equipment will sink like stones. From the air, these areas look like normal fields, just slightly green, perhaps somewhat marshy, perfect for parachute landings. They're death traps, engineered with mathematical precision. When a paratrooper hits water over his head while carrying a full combat load, he has approximately 45 seconds to live. The weight distribution is brutally calculated. M1 rifle, 8 pounds. Ammunition, 12 pounds. Radio equipment, 15 pounds. Medical supplies, 7 pounds. Rations and water, 11 pounds. Demolition charges, 9 pounds. Entrenching tool, 3 pounds. Reserve parachute, 20 pounds. Total, 85 pounds of gear designed to keep him alive in combat, now guaranteed to kill him in water. Private First Class Joseph Bale of the 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment discovers this nightmare at 1:52 a.m. He lands in one of Rommel's flooded areas with the force of a human meteor driven 12 feet underwater by the impact and his equipment load. Bale is 19 years old, son of a Michigan auto worker who's never seen water deeper than the Detroit River. He's trained to fight Germans, not to escape from underwater death traps while wearing a mobile arsenal. Submerged in freezing Norman water, tangled in parachute lines. Bale faces a series of deadly problems that must be solved in sequence, or he dies. First, his parachute has become a silk burial shroud, trapping him underwater. The lines wrap around his arms and legs like tentacles. The more he struggles, the more entangled he becomes. Second, his equipment is dragging him deeper. Every piece of gear that might save his life in combat is now an anchor pulling him toward the bottom. He must shed equipment to reach the surface. But which equipment? Guess wrong, and he might survive drowning only to die in combat. Third, he's running out of air. 19-year-old lungs weren't designed to function underwater while fighting for survival. His body is consuming oxygen at panic rates, and he has perhaps 15 seconds of consciousness left. Bale manages to cut through his parachute lines with a knife, the same knife he's supposed to use against German sentries. He sheds his heavy pack, sacrificing ammunition and supplies to reach the surface. He claws upward through water that feels thick as syrup, driven by survival instincts stronger than training. He breaks through into air that tastes like salvation itself. Around him, he can hear other splashes, other men hitting the water. Some call for help in voices that crack with terror. Others make no sound at all. But Bale's survival is statistical anomaly. Unit records from the 507th Parachute Infantry Regiment tell the mathematical story. 2,004 men jumped into Normandy. 347 landed in flooded areas. 192 drowned before reaching shore. These aren't just numbers. Each represents a family that will receive a telegram. We regret to inform you that your son is missing in action. Missing because his body lies at the bottom of an artificial swamp, weighed down by equipment that was supposed to bring him home alive. British paratrooper Fred Millward experiences the horror from a different angle. Anti-aircraft fire blows him out of his aircraft before the green light, sending him tumbling toward flooded ground he can't see in the darkness. "I had one hell of a crack on the back of my head, which took my helmet off," Millward remembers. "Being blown out like that, I thought, where am I going to land? Because the green light hadn't come on." Millward discovers himself in a bomb crater, dazed but alive. Nearby, he finds another survivor. "I went over to this parachute and called down. 'Is that you, Sid?' And he said, 'Yes, Fred. We were the only two that actually arrived from that aircraft. The rest of them went down in the water in the floods. There were 192 lost there. Just went straight in.' The mathematics are brutal and random. Of the 194 men on Millward's aircraft, only 2 survive. The anti-aircraft blast that nearly killed Millward actually saved his life by preventing him from jumping into the flooded killing ground where 192 of his comrades drowned. The drainage ditches around the edges of the floods were about 12 feet deep, Millward explains, and the Germans had coiled barbed wire right around the place. So if you went in, that was it. Picture the horror. A paratrooper lands in what appears to be a shallow stream, only to discover he's in a drainage ditch deeper than he is tall. He tries to climb out, but his hands encounter barbed wire that tears through his gloves and into his flesh. The more he struggles, the more entangled he becomes. The weight of his equipment pulls him backward into the water. He's trapped between drowning and bleeding to death, unable to climb out, unable to swim free, unable to call for help because his mouth fills with water every time he tries to speak. Some hang on for hours, hoping for rescue that never comes. They die slowly, incrementally, their strength ebbing with each failed attempt to escape their wire and water prison. Staff Sergeant Donald Burgett lands in a flooded field at 2:17 a.m. and immediately sinks out of sight. But Burgett is a strong swimmer from the lakes of Michigan, and he manages to fight his way to the surface while shedding non-essential equipment. Breaking through into the air, he hears voices calling for help in the darkness. Following the sounds, he discovers Private Tommy Morrison, trapped in barbed wire with water up to his chin. Morrison has been in the water for 20 minutes, and he's losing feeling in his legs. Burgett spends 45 minutes cutting Morrison free with wire cutters from his demolition kit. Working underwater by feel, slicing through metal obstacles while Morrison's strength fades, Burgett represents the kind of individual heroism that saves lives one soldier at a time. They reach shore together as dawn breaks over Normandy. Two men who should be dead, saved by courage, skill, and the kind of luck that makes the difference between telegram and homecoming. But scattered across Rommel's flooded fields lie the bodies of hundreds who weren't so fortunate. American paratroopers who traveled 3,000 miles to liberate France, only to die in Norman water that never should have existed. Their sacrifice isn't meaningless. The scattered nature of the drops means German defenders face threats from every direction, unable to concentrate forces against any single objective. What looks like tactical disaster becomes strategic advantage. But the cost in human lives is measured in telegrams that will arrive at American homes weeks later. Missing in action, presumed dead body not recovered. In this landscape of death and confusion, salvation comes from the most unexpected source: French civilians who risk everything to save the invaders. Maurice Dubosc is awakened at 1:30 a.m. by the sound of many aircraft, flying low, engines laboring under heavy loads. Through his bedroom window, he can see parachutes blooming in the darkness, dropping men into the flooded fields near his home. Dubosc is 43 years old, railway worker, father of 3, husband to Marie. For 4 years, he's kept his head down, his opinions private, his hopes hidden. He works on trains that carry German supplies to the Atlantic Wall, collaboration that keeps his family fed, but corrodes his soul. At 1:30 a.m. on June the 6th, that changes forever. American paratroopers are drowning in the floods. Young men who've come to free France are dying in German water traps. Dubosc can hear them splashing, calling for help in a language he doesn't speak, but understands perfectly. He faces a choice that will define his life: stay safe and let other people's sons drown, or risk everything: his life, his family's lives, his neighbors' lives, to save enemy soldiers from enemy water. If the Germans catch him helping Allied paratroopers, he'll be shot. If they suspect his neighbors of knowing and not reporting his activities, they'll be shot too. His wife and children will be sent to concentration camps. His village will be burned as an example. The smart choice, the safe choice, the reasonable choice is to stay inside and pretend he heard nothing. Instead, Dubosc wakes his friend Henri Leveuf. Together, they launch a small rowboat into the flooded area and begin searching for survivors. Picture the courage: 2 middle-aged French civilians wearing civilian clothes, speaking no English, rowing through freezing water in total darkness, searching for enemy soldiers they've never met to save them from drowning in a country occupied by other enemy soldiers who will kill them if caught. They find their first survivor clinging to a fence post, barely conscious, weighed down by waterlogged equipment. The American is too weak to climb into the boat, so Dubosc and Leveuf haul him in like a landed fish. The paratrooper is hypothermic, exhausted, frightened, completely disoriented. Dubosc doesn't speak English beyond a few words picked up from BBC broadcasts. The American doesn't speak French beyond what he learned in a week-long language course, but they communicate perfectly through the universal language of human compassion. They row him to Dubosc's house, where Marie has hot soup waiting and dry clothes prepared. The American collapses by the fireplace, shivering uncontrollably, trying to explain through chattering teeth that there are others still in the water. Dubosc and Leveuf return to the floods, again and again and again. Each trip brings them closer to discovery by German patrols. Each rescued paratrooper increases the evidence of their treason. Each moment they spend on the water is a moment closer to execution. But they continue because some things are worth dying for. By dawn, the Dubosc house shelters 17 American paratroopers. 17 young men who should be dead, who would be dead, if not for the courage of a French railway worker and his friend. Marie feeds them from her family's meager wartime rations food that was supposed to last her own children through the week. The Dubosc children, wide-eyed with excitement and terror, help tend wounds and clean equipment. Staff Sergeant Robert Martinez, pulled from the water at 3:15 a.m., will later write to his wife in Texas, "A French family saved my life." I don't know their names. I can't speak their language. But they risked everything for a stranger who came to fight in their country. I will never forget them as long as I live. When the last paratrooper is warm and fed, Dubosc consults a map and leads them away from German positions toward their objectives. He guides them through fields he's known since childhood, past farms where friends and neighbors might betray them, along paths that could lead to safety or death with equal probability. The Americans disappear into the Norman countryside, carrying their weapons and their mission and their debt to a family they'll never see again, but will never forget. Dubosc returns home to find German soldiers searching the village, investigating reports of unusual activity during the night. They question him about aircraft and parachutes and wet clothes drying by the fire. He answers with the perfect composure of a man who's already decided that some things are worth dying for. The Germans find nothing conclusive. They leave with warnings and threats and promises to return. Dubosc waves goodbye from his doorstep, knowing he's just won the most important battle of his life. This scene repeats itself across Normandy with mathematical precision that defies coincidence. Records from Allied debriefings reveal the scope: 347 paratroopers rescued from water by French civilians, 89 families involved in rescue operations, 23 villages that provided shelter, food, or guidance to scattered soldiers. French farmer Henri Colbert pulls 6 Americans from a drainage ditch near Picauville. Village priest Father Jean Delacroix hides 8 wounded paratroopers in his church. Housewife Marguerite Lebrun shares her last potatoes with enemy soldiers who've come to liberate her town. These civilians understand the mathematics of resistance as clearly as the paratroopers understand the mathematics of survival. If caught, they die. If they do nothing, they live as slaves. The choice between courage and safety is also a choice between honor and submission, between freedom and fear. They choose freedom. They choose courage. They choose to risk everything for strangers who speak a different language, but share the same dream of liberty. Their actions save hundreds of lives and transform scattered chaos into organized resistance. Without their help, many paratroopers would never find their units, never complete their missions, never contribute to the larger victory. The French civilians become part of the invasion itself, adding their quiet heroism to the larger epic of D-Day. By 2:30 a.m., Normandy resembles a deadly scavenger hunt played in total darkness. Thousands of Allied paratroopers are scattered across 300 square miles of enemy territory, each man a walking arsenal designed to function independently, none sure where the other pieces of the invasion puzzle have landed. In this landscape of blind corners and hidden enemies, survival depends on solving a lethal identification problem. How do you recognize friends from foes when everyone is a shadow carrying a weapon? The solution is beautifully simple: cricket clickers. These small metal toys, distributed to every man in the 82nd and 101st Airborne Divisions, make a sharp click sound unlike anything found in nature. The protocol is elegant in its simplicity. Click once to identify yourself as friendly. Wait for 2 clicks in response to confirm the other person is also American. The Private First Class Donald Malarkey of Easy Company discovers that cricket warfare isn't foolproof. At 2:47 a.m., creeping through a hedgerow near Sainte-Marie-du-Mont, he hears a single click from the darkness ahead. Malarkey responds with the required 2 clicks. Silence. He waits, weapon ready, wondering if he's just identified himself to a German soldier who's learned the American system. The cricket clickers have been compromised almost immediately. German troops capture the devices and use them to set traps. Click. This time, Malarkey recognizes something in the rhythm. Americans click with confident precision. Germans click hesitantly, unsure of the timing. This click sounds American. Click, click, Malarkey responds. Out of the darkness emerges Staff Sergeant Bill Guarneret, also from Easy Company, also lost, also trying to find friendly forces in a landscape where everyone might be an enemy. Jesus, Malarkey, Guarneret whispers. I thought you were a Kraut. I thought you were too, Malarkey replies. How many guys you found? 3. All scattered to hell. You? Just me. Lost my whole stick in the jump. This conversation repeats itself across Norman fields, with variations that spell the difference between death and reunion. 2 men find each other, 4 men become 6, 6 become 12. Small groups coalesce into squads, squads into platoons, platoons into functional fighting units. But the cricket system has a fatal flaw. It only works if both sides play by the same rules. Staff Sergeant Matthew Ridgway discovers this at 3:15 a.m. when he clicks once and receives 3 clicks in response. Germans have captured enough devices to understand the system, but they haven't mastered the rhythm. 3 clicks means either a very confused American or a German trap. Ridgway doesn't take chances. He melts back into the darkness, abandoning the contact rather than risk walking into an ambush. This cat and mouse game forces Americans to develop backup identification systems based on things Germans can't easily duplicate. Cultural knowledge only Americans possess. The backup protocol uses challenge and response words, chosen for their linguistic difficulty. Flash and thunder. These words contain sounds that German speakers struggle to pronounce correctly. Flash with a German accent becomes Vlash. Thunder becomes Zunder, close enough to fool civilians, not close enough to fool soldiers whose lives depend on recognizing the difference. Private Robert Wynne tests this system at 3:23 a.m. when he encounters 2 figures moving through a hedgerow. Instead of cricket clicks, he calls softly, "Flash." The response comes back crisp and clear. Thunder, Americans. Wynne moves toward them, weapon ready but not aimed, prepared to discover friends or fight enemies depending on what emerges from the shadows. He finds Lieutenant Buck Compton and 3 other Easy Company soldiers, all lost, all looking for their unit, all carrying pieces of equipment that might prove useful if they can figure out where they're supposed to be. "Any idea where we are?" Compton asks. "Hell if I know," Wynne replies, "but at least we're lost together." This improvised organization becomes one of the greatest strengths of the airborne assault. Instead of rigid units that collapse when their command structure is broken, the scattered drops create hundreds of flexible, adaptive teams capable of independent action. Staff Sergeant Michael O'Brien, originally assigned to Charlie Company, finds himself leading a 12-man group that includes soldiers from 4 different units, 2 from Able Company, 3 from Headquarters Section, 1 from the Regimental Medical Detachment, and 5 men whose units he can't even identify. "We're not a company anymore," O'Brien tells his mixed group. "We're not even a proper platoon, but we're Americans, we're armed, and we're behind German lines. That makes us dangerous." German defenders, accustomed to fighting conventional military formations with predictable tactics and clear objectives, suddenly face an enemy that seems to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. They can't predict where the next attack will come from, because there is no next attack. There are hundreds of simultaneous independent actions occurring across their entire defensive sector. The scattered paratroopers create what military theorists would later call distributed threat networks. Every hedgerow might hide enemy soldiers. Every field might contain armed Americans. Every routine patrol becomes a potentially fatal encounter with unpredictable forces. By 4:00 a.m., the cricket click symphony of American identification echoes across Norman fields. Click, click, click. Click, click, click. The sound carries through hedgerows and over stone walls, creating an audio network of scattered soldiers finding each other in the darkness. Lieutenant Richard Winters, destined to become one of the war's most famous small unit leaders, gathers his first improvised command using nothing but cricket clicks and whispered passwords. Starting with 4 lost paratroopers, his group grows to 15 men by dawn. None were originally assigned to work together. They're from different companies, different battalions, sometimes different regiments, but they've become a unit through shared danger and common purpose, bound together by the simple fact that they're Americans fighting for the same cause in the same hostile territory. The cricket clickers succeed, not because they're perfect, but because they provide just enough identification capability to allow scattered soldiers to find each other without revealing positions to every German within hearing distance. This is warfare reduced to its most basic elements: recognition, trust, and the courage to approach unknown figures in the darkness, knowing they might be friends who will save your life or enemies who will end it. Of all objectives assigned to American airborne forces on D-Day, none carries more symbolic weight than the small Norman town of Sainte-Mère-Église. Population: 1,500. Strategic value: enormous. Whoever controls this town controls access to Utah Beach and the vital port of Cherbourg. The man assigned to capture this prize is Lieutenant Colonel Edward Cannibal Kraus, whose nickname tells you everything about his approach to warfare. Kraus earned his moniker through his ferocious combat style and his habit of devouring enemy positions with devastating efficiency. At 32, he's built like a heavyweight boxer, with hands that look capable of strangling enemy sentries and a face that suggests he finds violence both professionally satisfying and personally enjoyable. On the evening of June the 5th, Kraus addresses his men with characteristic bluntness. "Tomorrow morning, I will be sitting in the mayor's office of Sainte-Mère-Église, and the stars and stripes will be flying on the flagpole above me. Bank on it." It's a promise bordering on arrogance. Considering his men are about to jump into enemy territory in darkness, most will miss their drop zones, their equipment will be scattered, their communications disrupted. But Kraus doesn't make promises he can't keep. At 1:00 a.m. on June the 6th, Sainte-Mère-Église experiences the kind of dramatic irony that seems scripted by fate itself. A house in the town center has caught fire, electrical fault, careless cigarette, or perhaps divine intervention, creating the perfect stage for the drama about to unfold. The flames spread quickly in the Norman wind, leaping from building to building, threatening to consume the entire town center. The local fire brigade responds with bucket brigades and hand-pumped equipment that would be antique by 1900 standards. German soldiers help fight the blaze, not from love of French property, but because they're billeted in buildings that might catch fire. The heat is intense, the light brilliant against the night sky. Every building in the town square is illuminated as clearly as midday. Shadows dance and flicker. Sparks rise into darkness like man-made stars. Into this scene of fire and light, 30 American paratroopers descend at 1:40 a.m. For the Germans, it's target practice. 30 black silhouettes against white parachutes, helpless targets floating down like clay pigeons in a shooting gallery lit by burning buildings. Some paratroopers are killed before their feet touch ground. Others land alive but tangled in parachute lines, helpless as German soldiers approach with rifles and bayonets. Several get caught in trees, hanging from branches like grotesque ornaments, while enemy forces take target practice. Private John Steele becomes the most famous victim and survivor of this deadly light show. His parachute catches on the church spire at the highest point in town, leaving him suspended 40 feet above the battle like a human weather vane. From his involuntary perch, Steele has the best view of urban combat in military history. Below him, surviving paratroopers fight running battles with German defenders through streets illuminated by growing flames. He can see muzzle flashes winking like deadly fireflies. He can hear the wet thump of bullets hitting human flesh. He can smell cordite and burning wood and human fear mixing in the superheated air. Unable to free himself from the spire, Steele makes the only choice that might keep him alive. He plays dead. For 2 hours and 17 minutes, Steele hangs motionless, letting his body sway with the wind, hoping German soldiers will assume he's a corpse and leave him alone. It's psychological endurance that would break most men. Picture the torture, hanging by parachute lines for over 2 hours, watching friends fight and die below, knowing that the slightest movement or sound could bring a sniper's bullet. His muscles cramp from the unnatural position. His circulation cuts off. He loses feeling in his extremities. But worse than physical discomfort is mental agony. He's helpless while other men fight his battle. He's a spectator to violence that should be his responsibility. He's alive while better men die, and there's nothing he can do except hang there and watch. At 3:57 a.m., a German patrol finally notices Steele and assumes he's dead. They cut him down, discovering he's very much alive but unconscious from exhaustion and exposure. Rather than execute him immediately, they take him prisoner, a decision they'll regret when American forces liberate the town 6 hours later. Steele's survival becomes one of the most famous individual stories of D-Day, but his private nightmare is just a footnote to the larger battle. Edward Cannibal Krauss lands in a field northwest of town at 1:52 a.m., miraculously uninjured, despite his aircraft nearly colliding with 3 others during the final approach. As he drifted toward ground, he counted 4 more aircraft passing beneath him, a mid-air traffic pattern that should have resulted in multiple collisions and catastrophic casualties. Instead, through skill and luck and minor miracles, everyone avoided everyone else. Krauss lands almost exactly where he intended, making him one of the few American paratroopers who can say that on D-Day. But his men are scattered across 10 miles of Norman countryside, and most of their radios were damaged during the drops. For conventional officers, this represents an insurmountable problem. How do you capture a defended town with a fraction of your assigned force, no communications, and equipment scattered across enemy territory? But Krauss isn't conventional. He's a problem solver who specializes in making the impossible merely difficult. He spends the next hour gathering every paratrooper he can find, roughly 180 men from various units, most of whom have never worked together. He has no detailed intelligence about German defensive positions. No artillery support, no air cover, no backup plan. What he does have is 180 highly trained paratroopers armed with the finest infantry weapons in the world, led by an officer who's never met a problem he couldn't solve with carefully applied violence. At 3:30 a.m., Krauss leads his improvised battalion toward the burning town. They advance through fields and hedgerows, using the fire as a navigation beacon. The closer they get, the more German resistance they encounter, scattered sentries and patrol posts that must be eliminated quietly to prevent alarms. Private Tommy Lorenzo, approaching from the southeast with Krauss's main force, encounters his first German sentry at 3:45 a.m. The enemy soldier is focused on the fire, silhouetted against the flames, completely unaware that American paratroopers are closing in from multiple directions. Lorenzo draws his fighting knife, 6 inches of steel, designed for exactly this situation. He approaches from behind, moving with deadly silence, learned through months of training. The sentry never knows what hit him. This scene repeats itself around the town's perimeter as Krauss's men eliminate German positions one by one. They use knives, garrotes, bare hands, anything that kills silently and prevents alarms that would alert the main garrison. The final assault begins at 4:15 a.m. Krauss divides his men into 4 groups, attacking from different directions simultaneously. The Germans, already exhausted from fighting the fire and dealing with earlier paratrooper drops, suddenly find themselves under coordinated assault from forces they can't see or count. The battle for Sainte-Mère-Église lasts exactly 47 minutes. It's urban warfare at its most brutal, house-to-house fighting through narrow streets lit by burning buildings. Germans fight from prepared positions with automatic weapons. Americans respond with grenades, small unit tactics, and the kind of individual initiative that turns ordinary soldiers into legends. When it's over, the American flag flies from the town hall flagpole, and Edward Cannibal Krauss sits in the mayor's office exactly as he promised. Mission accomplished. The first French town has been liberated, and it's still hours before the beach landings begin. Private John Steele, rescued from his church spire perch, will carry physical and psychological scars for the rest of his life. But his survival story becomes a symbol of American determination, proof that individual courage can overcome impossible odds. Steele's 2-hour vigil above Sainte-Mère-Église represents something larger than personal endurance. It's a metaphor for the entire airborne assault. Men hanging by threads over impossible situations, surviving through determination, and refusing to surrender, even when death seems certain. While Krauss consolidates his hold on Sainte-Mère-Église, another drama unfolds in Norman countryside that will have strategic implications far beyond its size. Lieutenant Malcolm Brannan of the 82nd Airborne has spent 3 hours collecting lost paratroopers and trying to navigate toward his objective. His makeshift platoon has grown to 14 men from different units, all carrying equipment that might prove useful if they can figure out where they're supposed to be. At 3:30 a.m., they encounter a French farmhouse. Brannan makes the calculated decision to wake the occupants and ask for directions, a risk that could lead to help or betrayal with equal probability. The farmer who answers the door is clearly terrified. Armed foreign soldiers appearing at his doorstep in the middle of the night could mean conscription, execution, or requisition of his livestock. His wife hovers behind him, clutching a bathrobe. Their children peer down from upstairs windows, wide-eyed with excitement and fear. Using a French phrasebook and universal sign language, Brannan explains they're Americans, that they're lost, and that they need directions to Sainte-Mère-Église. The farmer's relief is visible when he realizes these aren't German soldiers coming to destroy his life. The farmer produces a local map and points out their location, 5 miles southwest of Sainte-Mère-Église, between Picauville and Etienneville. Close enough to reach their objective before dawn, if they move quickly and avoid German patrols. But before the farmer can provide detailed directions, Brannan hears a vehicle approaching on the road outside. In occupied France, vehicles at 3:30 a.m. usually mean German military traffic patrols, supply convoys, or officer transport. Brannan signals his men to take positions around the farmhouse. If it's routine patrol, they'll let it pass. If it stops to investigate, they'll have to fight. Either way, they need to control the situation before it controls them. The vehicle that appears is no ordinary patrol car. It's a Mercedes-Benz staff car, the type used by high-ranking German officers. More importantly, it's traveling alone, without escort, which suggests the passenger is either very important or very stupid. Inside the staff car, Lieutenant General Wilhelm Fally is having the worst night of his military career. Fally commands the German 91st Infantry Division, one of the primary units responsible for defending this sector of Normandy against invasion. Earlier that evening, Fally had been en route to war games in Rennes, 100 miles inland exercises designed to test German response to various invasion scenarios. The irony will become apparent shortly. As reports of Allied aircraft activity began filtering in around midnight, Fally realized this wasn't an exercise. The invasion everyone expected was finally happening, and he was 100 miles from his command post. Fally ordered his driver to turn around immediately and race back to headquarters. They've been driving hard for 3 hours, pushing the Mercedes to its limits, on roads not designed for high-speed travel in complete darkness. Now, there's an American soldier standing in the road, clearly intending to stop them. Fally's driver has 2 seconds to make a decision that will determine whether his passenger lives or dies. He chooses to accelerate. Brannan and his men react instantly. 14 rifles open fire simultaneously, turning the Mercedes into a metal sieve. The windshield explodes. Tires blow out. The engine block cracks under armor-piercing rounds. The car swerves off the road and crashes into a stone wall at 40 miles per hour. The driver dies instantly, his body thrown through the windshield. General Fally is ejected from the vehicle, landing hard on Norman soil, dazed and bleeding but alive. For 30 seconds, Fally recovers consciousness and reaches for his sidearm, a Luger pistol that represents his last chance to die fighting rather than surrender. It's a gesture that's either courageous or foolish, depending on perspective. Malcolm Brannan doesn't wait to find out which. He shoots Fally through the forehead with a single round from his M1 Garand. Lieutenant General Wilhelm Fally becomes the first German general to die on D-Day, and one of the highest-ranking enemy officers killed during the entire Normandy campaign. More importantly, his death removes a key commander from the German defensive network, at the moment when his leadership is most needed. But the strategic impact goes beyond losing one general. Fally's death exemplifies the chaos and confusion that scattered airborne drops have created throughout the German command structure. Units are cut off from headquarters. Communications are disrupted. Officers are dying in random encounters with small groups of paratroopers who shouldn't exist in those locations. Instead of facing a coordinated invasion, they can respond to with standard defensive tactics. Germans are dealing with hundreds of small unit actions scattered across a massive area. Every road might hide an ambush. Every field might contain enemy soldiers. Every routine movement becomes potentially fatal. Brannan and his men search Falley's body and the wrecked Mercedes, finding maps, radio codes, and intelligence documents that prove valuable to Allied planners. The maps show German defensive positions across the entire Cotentin Peninsula, information worth more than a general's life. Private First Class. Robert Martinez, examining the documents by flashlight, discovers something that makes his blood run cold. Detailed plans for German reinforcement of the beaches, including timetables for moving armored reserves to counter the invasion. "Lieutenant," Martinez calls softly, "you need to see this." The papers reveal that German commanders expected the invasion, but planned to defeat it through rapid deployment of reserves. Falley's division was supposed to move toward the beaches at first light, supported by armor and artillery. Those reinforcements will never arrive on schedule. Their commanding general is dead, his staff scattered, his communications disrupted, his headquarters isolated by scattered paratroopers who continue wreaking havoc throughout the German rear areas. Brannan makes copies of the most important documents and sends them toward Allied lines through different messenger routes. If one messenger is killed or captured, others might get through with intelligence that could save thousands of lives on the beaches. The 14 American paratroopers disappear back into Norman countryside, carrying with them knowledge that they've just altered the course of the battle in ways they'll never fully understand. General Falley's death isn't just a tactical victory, it's symbolic of the airborne assault's broader strategic success. Scattered paratroopers operating independently have effectively decapitated portions of the German command structure, creating confusion and delay that will ripple through enemy responses for the next crucial hours. When the beach landings begin at dawn, German defenders will respond more slowly, less effectively, with less coordination than they would have if their command structure remained intact. 18,000 men jumping into darkness have achieved what no conventional military operation could accomplish. They've transformed the enemy's greatest strength knowledge of the terrain and prepared defenses into a liability by making every defensive position a potential target for unexpected attack. While American paratroopers fight scattered battles across western Normandy, British forces attempt one of the most challenging missions of the entire airborne assault, the destruction of the Merville Battery. This isn't just another tactical objective. The Merville Battery represents an existential threat to the eastern flank of the invasion. Its 4 massive guns, housed in reinforced concrete casemates, have the range and firepower to turn Sword Beach into a killing ground. The battery is a masterpiece of German defensive engineering. Each casemate is built with walls 6 feet thick, designed to withstand direct hits from battleship guns. The weapons themselves are Czech-built 150mm howitzers captured earlier in the war, each capable of firing a 95-pound shell up to 9 miles with devastating accuracy. Positioned 6 miles inland from Sword Beach, the guns can cover the entire landing area with interlocking fields of fire. Worse yet, they're perfectly sighted to catch landing craft in enfilade as they approach shore, meaning shells would strike boats lengthwise, potentially destroying multiple vessels with single shots. British intelligence estimates that if the Merville Battery remains operational during beach landings, it could destroy enough landing craft to cripple the eastern flank of the invasion. The mission to destroy it is assigned to the 9th Parachute Battalion under Colonel Terence Otway, a methodical officer who spent months planning every detail of what everyone knows is essentially a suicide mission. The original plan is militarily elegant. 650 men parachute near the battery, rendezvous at a predetermined point, organize into assault teams, and advance to the target. At exactly 4:30 a.m., 3 gliders carrying additional troops and heavy equipment crash land inside the battery compound, serving as the signal for the main assault. Simple, direct, effective. Of course, military plans rarely survive contact with reality, and this one disintegrates before it begins. Fred Millward, our 20-year-old paratrooper blown out of his aircraft by anti-aircraft fire, represents the random tragedy that destroys mathematical precision. Of 194 men on his aircraft, only 2 survive, he and his friend Sid, both saved by the explosion that killed 192 comrades. We were the only 2 that actually arrived from that aircraft, Millward remembers. The rest went down in the water in the floods. There were 192 lost there, just went straight in. This scene repeats across multiple aircraft. Planes shot down over the channel. Paratroopers drowned in flooded fields. Men scattered so widely they never find the rendezvous point. By 1:30 a.m., Colonel Otway expects to command 650 men. Instead, he finds 110 paratroopers, less than 17% of his assigned force. By any rational military calculation, the assault should be cancelled. The odds of success, with 110 men against a fortified position designed to withstand battalion-strength attacks, are essentially 0. But essentially, 0 isn't absolutely 0, and the stakes are too high for rational calculation. If the Merville battery isn't destroyed, thousands of British soldiers will die on Sword Beach. Otway waits another hour, hoping more survivors will reach the rendezvous. By 2:30 a.m., his force has grown to 150 men, still less than a quarter of the original plan, but enough to constitute a serious attempt rather than mere suicide. The colonel makes the hardest decision of his military career. They're going ahead. At 2:50 a.m., 150 British paratroopers begin their approach to the Merville battery through terrain that seems designed to make their mission impossible. Bomb craters from Allied air raids, shell holes from previous bombardments, barbed wire entanglements, anti-personnel mines, machine gun nests, all of this in complete darkness, with no artillery support, no air cover, no backup plan. The approach takes over an hour of careful movement, each step potentially fatal, each sound potentially betraying their position to German sentries. They crawl through mud and wire and the debris of war, carrying demolition charges and assault weapons and certain knowledge that most won't see another sunset. By 4:00 a.m., they've reached the battery's perimeter defenses. From concealed positions, Millward and his comrades can see the massive concrete casemates that house the guns. Each structure looks impregnable, built to survive anything the Allies can throw at it. This is when the mission plan encounters its final fatal flaw. The 3 gliders that should provide both signal and support for the assault are nowhere to be seen. Glider 1 appears briefly in the sky, then disappears again, apparently lost. Its pilot, struggling with navigation equipment damaged by anti-aircraft fire, never finds the battery. The glider eventually crash lands miles away, its troops spending D-Day fighting entirely different battles. Glider 2 appears right on schedule, but under heavy German fire. Anti-aircraft guns that weren't supposed to be operational open up on the defenseless aircraft, filling it with holes. The pilot fights to maintain control as his aircraft disintegrates, finally crash landing in an orchard, where it immediately catches fire. The troops escape, but their heavy equipment is destroyed. Glider 3 never appears at all. Unknown to the men waiting at Merville, it became detached from its tow aircraft over the English Channel. In one of the war's stranger incidents, the pilots managed to turn the engineless aircraft around and glide back to England, landing at an airfield in West Sussex. The troops on board, unaware of their location, leap out with weapons ready and storm the control tower, demanding surrender in the name of the king. Several minutes pass before everyone realizes they're actually in England, at which point someone puts the kettle on. But Fred Millward and Colonel Otway know nothing of this farce. All they know is that their essential support has failed to materialize. No gliders, no heavy weapons, no additional troops. Just 150 men with rifles and demolition charges, facing a fortress designed to stop a battalion. Otway issues the command that defines the rest of their lives: fix bayonets. 150 British paratroopers assault a fortified position that should require 650 men to capture, armed with nothing but rifles, grenades, and desperate courage. Millward remembers the assault with the clarity that comes from surviving the unsurvivable. Strangely enough, I felt outside myself as I was running. I don't think I really had any fear, because I got this feeling it wasn't me. I know it sounds stupid, but that's what it was like. This psychological disassociation, watching yourself perform actions too dangerous for conscious thought, allows training and instinct to take over when rational thought would be paralyzed by fear. When we got to the casemate, we went in and shot up one room, and the sergeant said, "Give me your explosive and get out." So that's what I did. I put explosives on a gun and blew it. And that was it. The brevity conceals the horror of close quarters battle inside concrete bunkers. British paratroopers burst through steel doors into chambers filled with German soldiers. Rifle fire echoes off concrete walls like thunder. Muzzle flashes illuminate faces twisted with fear and determination. Men die within arm's reach of each other, stabbed with bayonets, clubbed with rifle butts, blown apart by grenades in confined spaces. The air fills with cordite smoke and blood spray and screams of wounded men. Concrete chips fly like shrapnel as bullets ricochet off walls. The floor becomes slippery with blood and brass cartridges and debris of violent death. It's warfare reduced to its most primitive elements. Human beings killing each other with whatever weapons come to hand, fighting room by room, corner by corner, until one side can fight no more. Somehow, impossibly, the British succeed. One by one, the casemates fall to assault teams that shouldn't exist, led by men who should be dead, carrying out a mission that should be impossible. The cost is astronomical. Of 150 men who began the assault, only 75 are still alive when fighting ends. 75 casualties, a 50% loss rate that would be catastrophic in any other context. But the mission succeeds. The guns are destroyed. The threat to Sword Beach is eliminated. One of our chaps said afterwards, "They should have annihilated us," Millward reflects. It's like the mayor of Merville said at some of the reunions there. They didn't know it was impossible, so they just did it. At 5:15 a.m., Colonel Otway fires a yellow flare into the dawn sky, the signal that the Merville battery has been destroyed. Out in the English Channel, HMS Arethusa receives the message and relays it to the invasion fleet. The guns that could have slaughtered thousands are silent forever. By dawn on June 6, 1944, the airborne assault appears to be a complete disaster. 90% of American paratroopers missed their drop zones. Hundreds drowned in flooded fields. Equipment is scattered across 300 square miles. Radio communications are largely non-functional. Unit integrity has collapsed. By any conventional military standard, Operation Neptune's airborne component should be classified as catastrophic failure. Instead, it becomes one of the most strategically successful military operations in history. The paradox lies in understanding what the Allied High Command actually hoped to achieve versus what military textbooks say should happen. The scattered drops that seem so disastrous create exactly the conditions the Allies needed: confusion and paralysis throughout the German defensive network. The Allied airborne forces were trying to seal the approaches to the Normandy beaches from east and west to make it harder for the Germans to bring up reinforcements and to try and drive in the Allied flanks. But sealing approaches doesn't require perfect unit integrity or precise tactical execution. It requires creating enough chaos behind enemy lines to disrupt German response capabilities. The scattered nature of paratrooper drops creates what German commanders have never encountered: distributed threat networks. Instead of facing concentrated enemy formations that can be identified, located, and countered with conventional tactics, they confront attacks everywhere at once. German radio intercepts on June the 6th reveal the scope of their confusion. American paratroopers attacking crossroads near Carentan. British forces have captured bridges over Caen Canal. Enemy soldiers spotted near Sainte-Mère-Église. Unidentified aircraft landing southeast of Cherbourg. Request immediate reinforcement at grid 347219. Artillery needed at multiple locations simultaneously. Each report demands response. Each threat requires troops to investigate. But German commanders can't tell which threats are real and which are diversions. They can't distinguish between major offensives and minor raids. This forces German forces to disperse their response exactly opposite of what sound military doctrine demands. Instead of concentrating reserves against the main Allied effort, they're compelled to scatter troops across the entire region, weakening overall defensive capability. The psychological impact on German troops is equally devastating. Soldiers trained to fight conventional battles against identifiable enemies suddenly face an opponent that seems to be everywhere and nowhere simultaneously. Unit cohesion breaks down as companies and battalions are detached to deal with various local emergencies. More importantly, the scattered airborne assault disrupts German communications and command networks at the most critical moment. Telephone lines are cut, radio stations are attacked, headquarters units are bypassed or destroyed. Officers are killed in random encounters with small groups of paratroopers. The death of General Falley exemplifies this broader pattern. A divisional commander who should be coordinating defense of his sector instead dies in a chance encounter with 14 lost American soldiers. His death removes a key decision-maker from German command structure when his leadership is most needed. This pattern repeats at every command level. Battalion commanders detached to hunt paratroopers, company officers killed in firefights with scattered soldiers, communications specialists captured or eliminated before they can report Allied positions. By dawn, the German defensive network in Normandy has been effectively decapitated, not through any single decisive action, but through hundreds of small unit encounters that collectively paralyze their ability to respond coherently to invasion. The eastern flank of the invasion zone is secured by Major Howard's capture of Pegasus and Horsa bridges. These aren't just tactical victories, they're strategic game changers, ensuring success of the entire Sword Beach operation. Without these bridges, troops landing on Sword Beach would be trapped in a narrow coastal strip, unable to advance inland, vulnerable to counterattack from German reserves. With bridges in Allied hands, the landing becomes a springboard for expansion into the French interior. The western flank is equally secure thanks to capture of Sainte-Mère-Église and destruction of key bridges and causeways. Edward Cannibal Krause's promise to sit in the mayor's office by dawn represents seizure of a strategic hub, controlling access to both Utah Beach and Cherbourg Port. The destruction of the Merville Battery eliminates the single greatest threat to Sword Beach landings. Those 4 guns, if operational, could have turned the beach into a killing ground. Their destruction by 150 British paratroopers represents one of the most cost-effective tactical actions of the entire war. But perhaps the most important strategic effect is temporal. The airborne assault buys time. German commanders spend pre-dawn hours responding to airborne threats instead of preparing for seaborne invasion. Troops that should be manning beach defenses are chasing paratroopers through countryside. Artillery that should be registered on landing zones is firing at scattered enemy positions. Most crucially, German reserves that should be positioned to counterattack beach landings are committed to local actions against airborne forces. Panzer divisions that could crush the invasion in its vulnerable initial hours are dispersed across Normandy, fighting company-sized actions against paratroopers. When first Allied landing craft approach beaches at 6:30 a.m., they face an enemy that's confused, dispersed, and exhausted from 6 hours of continuous combat against an opponent they never fully understood. The airborne assault succeeds not because it goes according to plan, but because it creates strategic effects that transcend tactical planning. 18,000 men jumping into darkness and uncertainty fundamentally alter the battlefield in ways no conventional military operation could achieve. They transform what should be an impregnable defensive position into a fragmented network of isolated strongpoints. They turn German advantages in terrain and preparation into liabilities. They create conditions favoring attackers despite defenders' superior knowledge of ground. Most importantly, they demonstrate that in warfare, sometimes the most effective approach is to abandon the plan and trust human courage, adaptability, and determination to achieve what careful preparation cannot. The mathematics of success aren't found in unit tables of organization or tactical manuals. They're written in the accumulated courage of thousands of individual soldiers who refuse to let impossible circumstances prevent them from completing their missions. As the sun rises over Normandy on June 6, 1944, the landscape bears little resemblance to the quiet agricultural region that went to sleep 12 hours earlier. Scattered across 300 square miles of countryside are the remnants of the largest airborne assault in history and the foundations of victory. Private John Steele no longer hangs from the church spire in Sainte-Mère-Église. German soldiers cut him down at 3:57 a.m., assuming he was dead. They discovered he was very much alive but unconscious from exposure and exhaustion. Rather than execute him immediately, they took him prisoner, a decision they regretted, when American forces liberated the town 6 hours later. Steele's 2-hour ordeal has become a symbol of individual endurance against impossible odds. His survival represents the triumph of human determination over mechanical failure, of personal courage over tactical disaster. Major Howard's men still hold their bridges, watching sunrise over water they control instead of the enemy. The Pegasus and Horsa bridges that seemed like impossible objectives 12 hours ago are now secure Allied strongpoints, ready to receive commandos marching inland from Sword Beach. Staff Sergeant Jim Woolwork, the glider pilot who achieved supernatural precision in his crash landing, has become a legend among airborne forces. His ability to land an engineless aircraft within 50 yards of its target, in total darkness, through fog, represents the kind of individual skill that changes the course of battles. Fred Millward and the 74 survivors of the Merville Battery assault have silenced the guns that could have slaughtered thousands. Their 50% casualty rate represents the highest price paid by any unit during the airborne assault, but their success removes the single greatest threat to the eastern flank of the invasion. The 4 concrete casemates still stand, but their guns are twisted metal, their ammunition magazines exploded, their threat to Allied shipping eliminated forever. 75 men died or were wounded to achieve this, but their sacrifice will save thousands of lives on the beaches. Across Norman countryside, small groups of paratroopers continue fighting their way to objectives, completing missions with improvised units and salvaged equipment. Some will continue fighting independently for days, never making contact with parent units, achieving strategic objectives through tactical initiative that no military college ever taught. The equipment they couldn't carry lies scattered in fields and marshes, radios that will never broadcast, weapons that will never fire, supplies that will never reach intended destinations. But the men themselves are where they need to be, doing what they train to do, proving that human courage can overcome mechanical failure. Maurice Dubosc and hundreds of other French civilians have risked everything to save drowning paratroopers. Their quiet heroism transforms scattered chaos into organized resistance, their knowledge of local terrain into navigational assistance, their homes into safe havens for wounded soldiers. The American flag flies over Sainte-Mère-Église, where Edward Cannibal Krauss sits in the mayor's office exactly as he promised. His improvised battalion of 180 men from various units has captured the strategic hub, controlling access to Utah Beach and Cherbourg Port. Captain Frank Lillyman and his fellow Pathfinders have established the invisible electronic infrastructure of invasion. 43 radio beacons scattered across enemy territory, some working perfectly, others jury-rigged from broken parts, all operated by men who knew they were probably going to die. The technology failed as often as it succeeded, but human determination compensated for mechanical breakdown. When machines broke, men became the machines. When radios failed, soldiers became the signals. In a few hours, the greatest seaborne invasion in history will begin. 7,000 ships carrying 130,000 men will approach Normandy beaches in the largest amphibious assault ever attempted. They will land on shores whose approaches are secured, whose flanks are protected, whose defenders are confused and exhausted. The airborne assault has achieved its strategic objectives not through precise execution, but through accumulated effect of thousands of individual acts of courage and determination. What looked like chaos has become victory. What seemed like failure has become foundation of success. What appeared to be the worst navigational disaster in military history has become the most strategically successful airborne operation ever conducted. The Sky Soldiers have done their job. They've opened the door to Hitler's fortress Europe and held it open for armies that will follow. They've proven that sometimes best-laid plans succeed, not because they go perfectly, but because they go wrong in exactly the right way. The scattered drops that appeared so disastrous have created a network of Allied strongpoints behind enemy lines. Missed objectives have been replaced by captured opportunities. Broken radios have been overcome by unbreakable determination. 18,000 men jumped into darkness and uncertainty. Many never saw the dawn. But those who survived have fundamentally altered the course of the war through hundreds of small victories that collectively changed everything. From chaos has come order. From disaster has come triumph. From 18,000 individual acts of courage has come the liberation of Europe. The cost has been enormous. Hundreds dead, thousands scattered, equipment lost, plans abandoned. But strategic victory is complete. The airborne assault has achieved what no conventional attack could accomplish, transforming the enemy's strongest defensive position into his greatest vulnerability. Out at sea, HMS Arethusa has received yellow flares signaling destruction of the Merville guns. Across the English Channel, 130,000 men are climbing into landing craft, preparing for the most dangerous journey of their lives. They're heading for beaches that, thanks to courage and sacrifice of airborne forces, are no longer impregnable. The paratroopers and glider troops have lit the way for invasion with their blood and determination. They've transformed the impossible into inevitable, the unthinkable into unstoppable. D-Day is about to begin in earnest, and thanks to men who fell from the sky in darkness, it will succeed. The Sky Soldiers have done the impossible. They've made victory not just possible, but inevitable. 18,000 paratroopers deployed across Operation Neptune, 13,000 Americans, 5,000 British and Canadians. 90% of American drops missed designated zones. All primary strategic objectives achieved despite tactical chaos. German command network effectively paralyzed. Beach flanks secured for main invasion. First German General Falley killed by scattered paratroopers. Merville Battery destroyed by 150 men against 650-man mission plan. 347 paratroopers rescued from drowning by French civilians. Strategic victory achieved through tactical adaptation.